Hello, my name is Michael Hooper, and today I am going to be talking about Two Serious Women by Jane Bowles. This is a fast reading novel about two women named Frida Copperfield and Christina Gehring. Both women have sort of bourgeois personalities, raised upper class, but they seem to be trying to break some old-fashioned molds and deal with some domineering men. This novel is actually in this book called My Sister's Hand in Mine. It's her entire collected works. Um, there's an introduction in here by Truman Capote where he is disappointed that this is all Jane Bowles ever wrote. She suffered a stroke in midlife and struggled to write after that. The two main characters, Mrs. Copperfield and Miss Gehring, actually meet in a party early in the book. And at that party, Mrs. Copperfield announces that she and her husband are going to Panama, and Christina Gehring meets a man named Arnold and leaves the party to go with him. But during the party, it's interesting. It's described that these men are gathered together, smoking and drinking together, telling stories, and the women seem to be hanging out with one another and talking. And this sort of reminds me of when Irv Sheffield told me about when Truman Capote and Harper Lee came to his house in the 1960s while he was researching his book In Cold Blood here in Kansas. He said that the women huddled around Harper Lee, listening to her tell stories, and most of the men gathered around Truman Capote to listen to him carry on. But anyway, back to the book. Miss Gehring inherits a large mansion from her family and is a bit lonely there, and later meets a woman by the name of Lucy Gamlin, who is kind of small and stocky and homely and says she will never travel overseas. And for some reason, Christina invites her to live with her, and so Lucy moves in with her. And then later she meets this Arnold at this party and goes back to his place with him upon his invitation. And there she meets Arnold's father and mother. The mother didn't like her and basically kind of kicked her out of the apartment. But Arnold and Arnold's father both liked her quite a bit, and eventually Arnold moved in with Christina Gehring as well. And then not much later, Arnold's father moves in there too. She has quite a household, and she had sold her rich house, her big mansion, and moved to an island and rented a house there, and that's where all of these people were living. One night she decides, I got to get out of here, and she takes the train to the other side of the island and a ferry to shore and goes to this bar and meets a guy named Andy. Andy is kind of a loser. He describes himself as a bum. But he invites her back to his place, and Christina Gehring agrees to go. He wants to get intimate with her, but she says no, but does agree to come back the next day. Well, the next day she comes back with Arnold and Arnold's father. Arnold ends up playing basketball, and Arnold's father follows her to this bar, but at the bar, this Andrew McLean, Andy, that she went to meet, um, calls him a monkey, really just says terrible things about Arnold's father, and he cannot believe that she's hanging out with this guy. And eventually, this Christina Gehring comes back to this location, goes to this same bar, and there she meets another guy, kind of a gangster-looking guy, big old guy, who doesn't talk much, and he calls her a prostitute. And I couldn't believe he'd call her that, because she's bourgeois and kind of dresses fairly well and looks nice, and this guy insists that she's a prostitute and invites her back to his place. And lo and behold, Christina Gehring goes with him. I can't believe it. And while there, he tries to get intimate with her, but doesn't get very far. And then he gets called away to a restaurant. So they go to this restaurant, and then he abandons her at the restaurant. And then let's move on to Frida Copperfield. She and her husband go to Panama, and in Panama, Frida meets a prostitute by the name of Pacifica, and really is enchanted by this girl. They even sleep together, not have sex, but they sleep in the same bed, and Frida Copperfield feels very peaceful during this moment. But somebody suddenly comes to the door, knocks on the door, and it's a sailor who is interested in Pacifica, and he comes into the place, and Mrs. Copperfield leaves, but hears shouting and screaming and fighting, and thinks she should call the police, but her friend, she has this friend she tells all this to, says, no, don't call the police. Pacifica can handle this. She's been through this before. At another point, Pacifica invites Frida to go swimming with her. And, Mrs. Copperfield says, well, I can't swim. But Pacifica says, well, I'll teach you. So they go to the ocean, and Pacifica holds Mrs. Copperfield up on her back and lets her float in the ocean. And she feels happy and sick at the same time. At another point, this Frida Copperfield is hanging out in this bar with Pacifica and some other friends, and she gets so excited that she starts singing. She's in kind of an exaltation, a jubilation. And it just, pretty interesting. Frida Copperfield actually does not follow her husband, and he goes off on adventures by himself. And then finally, in the end, Frida Copperfield takes this Pacifica with her back to New York. And they meet up with Christina Gehring at this restaurant where she's been abandoned. And Frida confides in her that she's really likes this Pacifica and really kind of wants to spend the rest of her life with her, but is worried that Pacifica may leave her because another man has fallen in love with her. So kind of a strange situation here. Um, there's a letter that Arnold's father writes to his wife, because at one point he'd left her and moved in with Christina Gehring, and now is wanting to go back home. So this is his letter to his wife. Dear Ethel, I hope that you will read this letter with all that indulgence and sympathy which you possess so strongly in your heart. I can only say that there is in every man's life a strong urge to leave his life behind for a while and seek a new one. If he is living near to the sea, a strong urge to take the next boat and sail away, no matter how happy his home or how beloved his wife or mother. It is true also, if the man is living near a road, that he may feel the strong urge to strap a knapsack on his back and walk away, again, leaving a happy home behind. Very few people follow this urge once they have passed their youth without doing so. But it is my idea that sometimes age affects us like youth, like strong champagne, that goes to our heads and we dare what we have never dared before. Perhaps also because we feel that it is our last chance. However, while as youths we might continue in such an adventure, at my age one very quickly finds out that it is a mere chimera and that one has not the strength. Will you take me back, your loving husband, Edgar? This letter really kind of points out something that I experienced early in my life. In my 20s, I thought, if I didn't want to be that person who just worked every day 9 to 5 and then retired at age 65 and decided, well, now I'm going to go travel and see the world. I thought, no, that's not for me. I'm going to retire now and go see the world. So at age 26, I saved up $5,000 and quit my job and moved to Europe, and stayed there for 6 months, living in Greece and Spain, and had a wonderful time. It was a life-changing experience for me. And when my wife and I got married, we went to Europe for a month and have done a lot of traveling together, except now during this COVID period, it's been very difficult to travel. But I guess this is the thing that, Henry David Thoreau said, I left the woods for as good a reason as I went there. Perhaps it seemed to me I had more lives to live and no more time for that one. Well, I think these women are kind of feeling that same thing. I want to live a different life. I want to see something new. I want to feel something different. I want to experience something I've never experienced before. And that is why I think they get entangled with people they perhaps wouldn't normally get involved with. But that is the risk of an adventure, for sure. I mean, when I was on my adventures, I met some very fascinating people, some, very interesting and provocative, and some a little bit dangerous. But fortunately, I was able to get through it okay. Anyway, this concludes my review of Two Serious Women by Jane Bowles. I highly recommend it, especially because it's so well written. It just is very believable. Thank you very much.